Welcome to the Lancaster County Democrats' Watchful Citizen Show. My name is Barb Baier, and today's guest is Ann Bleed, and she is running for the Lower Platte South Natural Resource District, Subdistrict number 7. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm very happy to be here and pleased to talk about the NRD.
Well, very good. Tell us, why are you going and running for the Natural Resource District?
Say NRD, that's easier.
Okay, I will do that.
I am running because I've had a long focus and concern about maintaining our water supplies, both the quantity and quality of our water for both today and our children and grandchildren tomorrow. And the NRD is really where the rubber hits the road when it comes to managing natural resources, and in particularly managing groundwater. I also believe I have qualifications I can bring to the board that will help make wise management decisions.
So tell us a little bit about your background and why you have gotten so interested in water issues.
Well, I have training as an engineer and also as an ecologist. When I first came to Nebraska over 40 years ago, I realized that water was incredibly important to Nebraska, perhaps more so than in other states. And I became interested in water. In fact, I've worked for over 40 years on water issues, over 20 years at the Department of Natural Resources, first as state hydrologist, then as assistant director, and finally retiring after I was director. I also teach at the university, Integrated Resources Management, and I co-teach a law school class on environmental law and policy at the law school.
You know, I didn't realize you had so many qualifications. That's very good. We need people with that kind of expertise. Could you tell us what the NRDs are and what their function is throughout the state?
Sure. The NRDs are very unique, and they're unique in the United States. As far as I know, Nebraska is the only state that has an NRD system like we have. The NRDs were created in the early 70s to combine a multitude of different natural resource-related districts for soil, for water, for drainage, and so forth into one unified system. They are a locally controlled board, which is very important, and they are elected locally. They have been charged by the legislature with 12 specific functions. Basically, soil conservation, flood management and prevention of flood damages, drainage control. They are in charge of managing and maintaining fish and wildlife habitat, outdoor recreational areas such as parks and trails, and importantly, they are the major entity in charge of our groundwater, both the quality and quantity of our groundwater.
Do they have taxing authority?
Yes, they do have taxing authority. A little less than, or about 2% of our property taxes go toward the NRD, and they have to make a lot of wise decisions, important decisions on using that 2%.
So why should the public be interested in NRDs? How does that impact their lives?
Well, I think for me, the major impact is on our water supplies, and this summer brought home the importance of having plentiful water supplies as well as good quality water supplies. The NRDs are the ones that manage the use of groundwater, and that affects stream flow. We get our water in Lincoln from the Platte River. If the Platte River flows are down and they are impacted by decreased groundwater aquifers that decrease in part because of pumping, but not entirely, obviously. The drought was important as well there. But we are impacted by that, and therefore it's important to Lincoln. The other thing the NRDs do is help farmers manage their applications of nitrogen and fertilizer and pesticides. And if we can get those managed properly, we have less that get into our water supply, and we have less requirement for expensive treatment plants to clean up water. It's a lot easier to prevent contamination and a lot less costly to try to prevent water contamination than clean it up after it's been contaminated.
Why should people living in an urban environment be concerned about water quality issues?
Well, if you're drinking water, you should be concerned about water quality issues. You want to make sure you're not, your water is up to health standards when you're drinking it. And if it's not, and if that's something that has to be treated in a water treatment plant, it drives up our costs. The other thing the other NRD does is it manages and controls flooding, and that's very important in Lincoln as well. Lincoln is kind of in a bowl, and we get a lot of the flood water that comes down into Lincoln. And if you look at a lot of the streams in Lincoln itself, you'll see a lot of channel work, and that's the responsibility of the NRD to help prevent flooding in Lincoln itself.
So you were mentioning things about nitrates and those kinds of chemicals, herbicides, pesticides that farmers use to raise their crops. Now, if Lincoln's in the bowl and that's washing down, is there a connection there between those issues?
Well, the major connection is that to the extent that gets into groundwater, it also gets into stream flow, because there's a strong connection in Nebraska between groundwater and surface water flow. We get our water from the Platte River, as well as a lot of the communities in and around Lincoln. They get their water from the groundwater. If the groundwater becomes contaminated, and nitrates are a particular problem, then they become unhealthy for people to drink, and that's costly.
So, can you tell me what some of your goals are for being on the NRD, what you hope to accomplish?
Well, as I said before, my major concern and my major goal on the NRD is to try to be proactive in dealing with our water supplies for the future. One of the concerns that I have is that we do have global warming, and the expectation, the estimates are that we'll have increased droughts and increased floods, severity and frequency of both. So I think we need to be very proactive in figuring out how we're going to deal with both. I would like to see the NRD work closely with cities and towns on some plans so that we can assure that everybody has water supply for the next drought. I would also like to work with them on making sure that when the floods come, that we are preventing as much flood damage as possible. But the major concern I have is working on drought priorities. The other issue is that I think we can be more cost effective in managing our water supplies if we maintain natural areas that can act to prevent floods, to increase groundwater recharge, and to clean up contaminated groundwater. Those kinds of things are called ecosystem services, and by allowing nature to help us clean up our water and recharge it and prevent floods, I think it can be more cost effective than having to spend a lot of money on flood control structures and water treatment plants.
So you're really looking to save the taxpayers' money while going and preserving the environment. You feel those two issues are connected then?
Very definitely. And the concept of ecosystem services, I think, is very important. We get a lot of services from the ecosystem that we don't have to pay money for. Honeybees are an excellent example. They pollinate our crops. I've mentioned the wetlands. Prairies also do a great job of conserving soil and preventing sediment and contaminants and getting in our water. We don't have to pay for those, so we can use those to save money instead of paying for large structures.
We hear a lot about the unique environment that Lincoln is settled upon. It's often talked about as the saline wetlands. Could you go and tell us why it's important to go and save a saline wetlands?
Well, I think I've already mentioned one aspect of it, and that is a wetland can be an important ecosystem service for Lincoln and Lancaster County. The other aspect of it is the saline wetlands, like we have in Lincoln, are fairly rare. The Salt Creek Tiger Beetle beetle depends on the saline wetlands, and that, of course, is a very rare insect. And if we can maintain those, we can increase our resilience. And resilience is a concept that's somewhat new to ecosystem theory now, but it's an important concept that basically says that in times of uncertainty, it's better not to have all your eggs in one basket. If we can maintain a diversity of habitats and a diversity of species, just like when you try to maintain your investment funds in times of uncertainty where you're not sure what's going to happen in the future, you try to diversify. It's the same thing with ecosystems, and I think it's important to try to maintain our diverse habitats in the face of the uncertainty of climate change.
Oh, that's a very interesting concept. Now, I think there's a push and a pull between saving the environment and then development and the need to have a good economy. What are some of your thoughts about that?
Well, there's always a push and a pull, and you have to very carefully weigh the benefits and costs and figure out what the trade-offs are. And I suppose there are times when the benefits and cost, even if you look at all the benefits, just not the monetary benefits, don't outweigh the cost, and you would go ahead with a certain type of development. On the other hand, developments very often have impacts on their neighbors that they don't pay for. For example, a development that doesn't control its runoff can put floodwater and sediment on a neighbor's yard, or impact the water and sediment and so forth coming into Lincoln. I think it's important for developers to pay for those costs as they develop, because the alternative is we either have to live with increased contamination of water and runoff and sediment, or we as taxpayers have to pay for cleaning up and building structures to prevent the runoff and sedimentation of our water. So somebody has to pay the cost. I believe the person who's benefiting from the development should pay the share of the costs that they cause because of the development.
You know, when I think of development, I often think of a lot of pavement. What relationship does having a lot of pavement around have with water quality and the environment?
Well, water pavement forces water to run off the land as opposed to recharging through the soil and into the groundwater. When water runs off, then the contaminants in the water also run off. We are much more likely to have flooding where there's a lot of pavement upstream, as well as contaminated water. If water goes through the soils and down into the groundwater, in the process you slow down flood flows and runoff. You recharge the groundwater, and there's also a lot of cleanup of contaminants that can occur naturally. And this is the focus of the NRD's stormwater runoff program, where they will work at the request of cities and other communities. They will work with them to develop a stormwater runoff to prevent some of these adverse impacts of runoff. And a lot of that program deals with permits for developers.
I just want to remind you all that you're watching The Watchful Citizen. We're sponsored by Lancaster County Democrats, and today's guest is Ann Bleed, and she's running for the Lower Platte South NRD as Subdistrict number 7, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, could you go and describe a little bit to us for a moment what Subdistrict number 7 is, so that our viewers will know if they're part of, need to be voting for you?
Well, let me first say that if you really want to check it out, go to the Lower Platte South NRD webpage, and you can find out exactly what subdistrict you're in, no matter whether it's Subdistrict 7 or another district. But Subdistrict 7 is essentially north of O Street, south of Layton, and between 23rd and 84th. Now, there's some jogs in there, so you have to be a little bit more precise if you're on those boundaries, but that's essentially where it is.
And so how many members are there on the NRD?
There are 10 sub-districts. Each has 2 and then 1 member at large.
Okay, 10, and plus 1 member at large, so there's 11 of you.
Well, there are 21.
All together. Okay, I get. Oh, wow, that's a lot of people. So you have a real diversity of points of view coming together. Do you attend board meetings now? Do you see how that works?
Well, I have not attended board meetings recently, but I do have to mention that when I first got involved in water issues through the League of Women Voters many, many years ago, my job was to attend the NRD board meetings for the League. So I probably went to 3 or 4 years worth of meetings at that time.
Oh, that's good. So you have a lot of experience and familiarity with the work that they are doing.
In addition, my job at the state, I worked a lot with irrigators and farmers across the state, as well as natural resources districts across the state. So I have a very good understanding of how many NRDs work.
Good. Now, when we think about our children and grandchildren with parents, we often want to go and make sure that the future is a good future for them. What do you think is one of the most important legacies that we can give to our children and grandchildren?
Well, I come back to water, and I realize I sound like a monotonous do-loop, but water, you can't live without water. Our very life depends on it. So I think the most important thing we can do for our children and grandchildren is make sure that they have a plentiful supply of good quality water. And part of doing that, again, goes back to providing ecosystem services to help the water supply be maintained. So I also think we should be preserving some of our natural areas. And of course, there are a lot of other benefits to preserving natural areas other than helping our water supply.
Including recreation.
Absolutely. Recreation. A lot of beauty comes from natural areas. And I can't help but mention that the NRDs have been very active in managing and developing trails, not so much in the city of Lincoln, but outside of Lincoln. The Mopac Trail that starts at 84th and goes east, hopefully someday all the way to Omaha, is a trail that is much used, and those trails are used all throughout the NRD.
You know, when you were talking about goals that you were hoping to bring to the NRD, you talked about a global perspective. Could you expand on that a little bit? Is there an interconnection between water runoff, let's say, and perhaps other parts of our country or even the world?
I think one of the major global connections with NRDs is that Nebraska is a real food basket for the world, and so are the farmers in our NRD. They cannot grow crops without water. We saw again that this summer the corn crops that could not be irrigated were drying up and did not produce anything or very little. So if we want to feed the world, and they expect that the population and the need for food the need for food in particular will double by 2050, our water supplies aren't doubling. They're pretty much going to stay the same, or in some areas they're actually decreasing. So there's a direct connection between our management of water and working to make better use of our water and our global food supply.
You know, my family and I, we took a trip down to Corpus Christi and Padre Island a couple of years ago, and beautiful area. And I learned about the dead zone, which can come over that way and sometimes isn't. Is there any connection between the Gulf of Mexico and the dead zone and water runoff?
Well, of course, the thing about streams is water flows fairly quickly in streams, and it also goes a long way, so that when we contaminate water in the Lower Platte South NRD, some of that water eventually gets into the Platte, which gets into the Missouri, which gets into the Mississippi, and it all contributes to the potential zones, or the dead zone in the south there.
And the dead zone is an area in the ocean, in the Gulf, that literally nothing grows, everything dies. Is that correct?
Well, I won't say everything, nothing grows, but it's an area where the kinds of things we would like to see grown there do not grow well.
Okay, okay. So there is a global impact on water. Water is something that everybody is interested in. Well, tell us a little bit about your campaign, because it's just incredible, your knowledge base and what you could bring to the NRD, and I'm sure our viewers want to know how they can get involved in your campaign.
Well, I think, of course, the most important thing for getting involved is to vote, and to make sure you vote for an NRD representative, no matter where you are in the district, because the NRD, as I said, is very important. Obviously, I would like to have people in Subdistrict 7 vote for me. If you aren't in Subdistrict 7 but know of somebody who lives in Subdistrict 7, please help me by telling them to vote for me. I, of course, can always use a little extra money, and you can send money to Jan Gauger, who is my campaign treasurer, and if we look at her address, it's on 40th Street. Very quickly here, you'd think I'd have that memorized by now. 1401 40th Street. I'm going to check again and make sure that's right. But I still am looking for a few people to help me with leaflets. So.
Okay, so going door to door then.
Yeah, just leading. It's 1404 North 40.
Okay. Do you have a website by any chance?
Yes, I do. It's annbleedfornrd.blogspot.com.
Very good, very good. So you're doing a lot of door-to-door. What's your experience going door-to-door? What are people saying to you?
Well, it's been very interesting going door-to-door. A lot of people don't know much about the natural resources districts, and so I try to tell them a little bit about it. A lot of people have told me that they are very concerned about our water supplies, especially after the summer, and the quality of the water. And the other major concern I've heard is they are concerned about spending a lot of money on flood control structures, and they wonder about the cost benefits and the cost in general of those structures. But in general, people are very interested in what I have to say, which is nice, and Nebraskans are nice, so it's been fun.
Yeah, it is fun going door to door. It's an educational experience in and of itself. Well, I want to go and encourage everyone to come to Lancaster County Democrat party meetings. We have them every third Tuesday of the month at the Communication Workers of America Union Hall at 25th and N Streets at 7 p.m. And there you'll get to meet great candidates like Ann Bleed and many others, and you'll have opportunities to have conversations, but also opportunities to volunteer. And getting involved with the political process is often incredibly rewarding, and you get to meet great people, and you get to develop these wonderful friendships. I can't tell people enough how important that is. Yeah, I just love politics because of the friends you develop. It is so much fun. Now, do you have any closing thoughts or remarks to share with us, Ann?
Well, I just basically want to thank you for the opportunity, in particular the opportunity to talk about the natural resources districts. A lot of people don't really know much about the NRDs, but they are a very important governmental agency in our area. And please do take time to look at who the NRD candidates are throughout the district, and make sure you vote at the bottom of your ballot. We're way below the bottom of the ballot, not right at the top. But it's an important vote that can affect your lives.
It certainly can. We just have a moment or two more, and I just want to give you this opportunity to share any other kinds of thoughts that you may have about water quality issues or your campaign, anything of that nature.
Well, I guess the main thing I would reiterate is water is important to our lives, and we really need to take care of our water supplies as well as our other natural resources. And I firmly believe that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so we need to work together and collaborate with all those who are impacted by the actions of the NRDs to make sure that we provide that proactive ounce of prevention instead of putting the cost on our grandchildren and children in the future to clean up our mess.
Very well stated. Thank you so much, Anne, for coming. We appreciate your service, and good luck on your campaign.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.